Hi everyone. So last time I kind of left us off with this beginning of this to-do list. So we had a JSON blob or an array as shown here that's filled with objects, strings, and another object. And we had basically built the beginnings of our to-do list application. We have a list that takes in some elements that are that list of to-dos, and when we get that, we basically map through those elements, and we call this flattened elements method. All right, and that flattened element method basically says if that value is a string, then return that value inside of some JSX. So there's that list element. All right, so I tweaked it a little bit from what we left it before. Last time we were invoking the flattened elements, passing in elements, and then basically calling the map function inside of this method. I think it's a little bit cleaner if we start off on this other foot, this other strategy. And but before we do that, let's think about what we named different pieces of our components. All right, so let's go look at back at our app. All right, so remember what I said in our first discussion of this, that the cool thing about the way JSX works and React works is it makes relatively readable code. It's easy to grok, easy to work through. All right, so if I were to look at this and be like, hey, this thing is returning a div, we all know what a div is, and then it has a list with elements in it, and the elements are the to-dos. Okay, that's reasonable, but it's not as good as it could be. So what do lists usually have in them? Lists usually have items in them. So naming is super critical. All right, so what we've done now is we've updated the props, right? So we used to have a prop of elements, and then we destructured that elements prop in our function over here. Now we've changed that elements to items. So we have to make sure that we make the changes appropriately. All right, so we're mapping through those items, and then what are we doing with those things? Well, we're flattening those items? I mean, yes, we are. And flatten's a pretty standardized term. So I think we could probably leave it with flatten, but maybe it's just flatten. All right, so, and for those of you who aren't, aren't familiar with ES6 and using map functions, so if you're not using Lodash or anything like that in your ES5 stuff, basically what a map does is it says, take every item in this list and apply a function to it, and at every index where that item was, whatever this function returns, that's what's now at that index. So if we wanted to say item, and we're using arrow functions, and we just wanted all of them to say hi, then we would have 4 highs in our code. Whoops, let's see if I screwed something up. Looks like I did. Of course, didn't close our function. All right, so now we should have 4 highs. Hi. All right, that's not what we want, but that's how it would work. Because now there are 4 highs in our array that is sitting in this location, and our JSX knows how to iterate through an array. Cool. All right, so what we want to call is some other function. And we want to basically say, why don't we call a function that flattens them? So let's just call it flatten items. All right, so when we call flatten items, that function is invoked, and every item, it's invoked on every item, so it's not invoked right here, but the map function actually invokes it and passes the item. It actually passes 2 things. It passes the item, and it also passes in the index that it's at, the key. So, but we're only using the first part of it, so let's just say, let's call that item. So, cool. All right, so now we have an item, and if that type of item is a string, then let's just return that string. All right, if the type of item is equal to an array, then maybe we want to return the array flattened. So maybe we want to just return item map, and call the same method on it, flatten items. All right. So if it's just an array of strings, then we're going to get back all the strings, and they're all going to be at the top level of our function. All right. Cool. So those are fine. But what we're really interested in are these kind of nested structure, right? We want to have our to-do list mirror kind of this constant that we're passing in. So Learn React should be like a top level thing. And then these should be sub pieces of Learn React. Learn Testing could be top level. Integrate React with the back end could be top level. Ancillary Learning would be top level. These 4 things would be secondary levels. Cool. All right. So the next type of object that we're kind of interested in are objects. All right. All right, so what does this want to return? Well, we can't use the nice if statement shorthand. We're actually going to wrap it in curly braces. So even though this looks nice and clean, we just can't do it for this one. So we want to return, and basically this creates a block that gets returned. So these parentheses. So we can create some JSX in here. All right, so we want to return a new array, actually, I think. And that new array is basically going to allow us to get some keys out of here. So we want to say object.keys, and those keys, we're going to pass in which thing it's going to get the keys from. Great, so that's now going to be an array. All right, so now we should have the 4 top levels pieces: Learn React, Learn Testing, Ancillary React with the backend, Ancillary Learning. Awesome. All right, but those aren't lists. So if we wanted to make them into a list, we call that map function again on it. And we'd say, all right, so for everything in there, just go ahead and flatten items. All right, so this isn't where we're going to end. We're just going to say flatten items. Cool. All right, so now we should have them coming back as top level pieces. But that's not what we want for these guys. We actually want to do something else. So we can actually say, hey, take that item, or take that key, and we're going to return some JSX. So we've wrapped a bunch of things together in here, but I think it'll hopefully make sense in the end. And what we're going to return from that thing, all right, is we're going to still return an li with the key in it. All right, so this is just going to look like the flatten items method that we just called, just to kind of clarify. All right, make sure we're closing everything. All right, so object keys, map key, 1 too short. Great. So now, oh, what did I screw up? So right now we don't need the return. Cool, so it's still looking the same. All right, but we also want to say, don't just return the key, also return a new list. What? All right, so remember what the list returns. It returns a div with a UL, and then it flattens all the things. I don't know what just happened there. All right, so cool. All right, so what are the items that this list is going to have? Well, the items are going to equal the item at the key. Cool. All right. This is just my linter does this to kind of clean things up for us. Okay, cool. So now hopefully what we'll return is this nicely, oops, stupid iTunes, go away. Nicely organized list. All right, so what we learned hopefully right now is naming is important. So I can't tell you if there's anything worse than going through a code base that has poorly named things, and these names could even be improved. So take time, like once you think you have a working solution, pretty happy with it, take time to go back through and be like, does this naming make sense? Yes, it'll slow you down in the short run, but in the long run, you'll have much better and much more readable code. All right. In addition, we don't need those divs there, so kind of shorten that guy up. And oops, Still looking pretty good. All right, so that's great. We now can hard code in our to-do list and have it listed out. All right, so that's fine and dandy, but we could have just done that in HTML. Like, it would have taken about the same amount of time and been about as exciting. All right, so let's see if we can adjust that a bit. All right, so how might we want to attack that? Well, we might want to have some events that get passed through that allow us to interact with our list, for example. So that's what we're going to spend our time on next. All right, and we'll see you in a few minutes.